got another super chat. This one is from DCJ again. DCJ killing it. DCJ writes, from the early team interviews, coaches are being super conservative, yet things just got started. But all they are hiding and denying potential surprise. This isn't them trying to hide anything or them being super conservative with information. There's nothing to tell. They're not doing anything. They haven't met these players before. All they know is what they've seen on social media and what they've encountered with these guys in these Zoom meetings. They don't know these players. All they know is what they've seen on film. They don't know these guys from Adam, from Eve. They're still learning guys' names. You know, I was funny listening to the linebackers coach, Steve Russ, and he was talking about how he was messing up Khaleke Hudson's name. He was calling him Kaliki. And Khaleke was like, it's Khaleke. Like, little stuff like that would annoy me if I'm a player because, dude, there's a draft process and there's all of this stuff leading up. Like, it's not hard to figure out my name, you know? But that's not here nor there. He didn't even know his name, you know? Ron Rivera's still learning people's name. He called Jaron Christian, called him Jaron Christian. And that's an easy mistake. We were calling him Jaron Christian for years. It's Jaron Christian. All right, but that's what happens when you got two first names. Anyway, I said all that to say this. They're still learning these players. They can't tell you much about any of these guys. Some of the best interviews were by veteran coaches. A lot of these coaches on this staff, they're either younger coaches or they haven't been here. They were with Rivera in the past, and so they're not very familiar with these guys. You can tell the guys that are students of the game and have done their homework, and you can tell the other guys that they just want to get their hands. Like, it's cool to watch film and all. They just want to get their hands on these players. And so, and being in training camp, and if you've been in enough training camps, and you're doing training camp like this year, it's just not the same. They would already be hitting. They would already be in inter squad scrimmages, and tonight would have been the Hall of Fame game. Let that sink in. We would have actually been watching real tackle football tonight. Had this been a normal offseason, tonight would have been the Hall of Fame game. Instead, we're talking about them going through glorified OTAs, shorts and shirts, possibly helmets on, but really not doing much of anything. Going through the motions is what they're doing right now. Rivera said it himself. It's like we're going through OTAs right now. So they're not really hiding anything as much as they are just essentially trying to figure out who are these players and what they bring to the table. So thank you for the super chat, DCJ. And on that note, we will now go to the Coach Speak segment before we get out of here. And I was able to listen to, and I've been really consuming a ton because there's not much. I don't know about you. I can't speak for you guys, but this training camp feels different. It almost feels like we are not getting football. And maybe I just need to overconsume and oversaturate myself in Redskins content to feel that way. And maybe once I start doing my podcast again and I start submerging myself and submerging myself in all of the football content that is out there, I'll feel like it's a real season on the horizon. But right now, kind of feels subdued a bit because this isn't a normal training camp per se. But I was listening to these coaches talk, and they just hammered home the point that this isn't a normal training camp. I heard from Ron Rivera, and that's where we'll start. We'll start with the head man in charge, Ron Rivera, and he pretty much echoed everything he's been saying. He did elaborate that Alex Smith was impressive. He also talked about how impressed he's been with Dwayne Haskins as well. How much command of the offense that he has from a verbiage standpoint, getting everybody lined up and things of that nature, how he looks in great shape. So that was encouraging to hear. He talked about how well Jaron Christian looked. Again, we're talking about movement skills. He talked about Sadiq Charles looking like a great athlete, but he also said it's going to take a little bit for Sadiq to kind of get up to speed in terms of the playbook and verbiage and things of that nature. So in that regard, Jaron probably has the upper hand because he's been in the league 4 years. And even though he hasn't played a ton, he's been around verbiage. He should be able to digest the playbook a lot faster than a rookie coming in Sadiq Charles. But we'll see. So listening to Ron Rivera speak, he kind of reiterated a lot of the things that he has been saying. And one of the biggest takeaways from Ron was him talking about Logan Thomas in the tight end position. He essentially said, look, man, this is how I read it. And I might be reading too much into this. He essentially said, look, I don't know about the tight end position, but I'm pretty much banking on Logan Thomas. Like, when's Logan coming back? Is he ready to come back yet? Like, he essentially sounded like, hey, Logan's the guy. And you know how I said Sadiq Charles, it's his job to win, but he doesn't have it yet, so it's not his job to lose, but he's going to get the first crack at winning the left tackle position. I think it's the other way around for Logan Thomas. I feel like it's his job to lose. Like, they're handing him the starting tight end position. He's got to pretty much wet the bed and allow other guys to take this opportunity from him. And even with the COVID setback, I think he's still at the front of the class in terms of the tight end position. So that was my biggest takeaway from Ron Rivera speaking. And you get into the positional coaches. My favorite 3 interviews from the positional coaches were Chris Harris, the defensive backs coach, ex-Chicago Bears DB. Randy Jordan, the running backs coach. We know Randy. He's been here for a while. One of the few holdovers, along with the special teams coordinator from the last regime. And then Ken Zampese, the quarterbacks coach. A lot of information from him. I thought he was one of the better interviews that I watched. Jim Hostler, the wide receivers coach, he's an interesting guy. We'll talk about him in a second. Sam Mills III is the defensive line coach. A lot of energy there. He's a guy that's very energetic. And Steve Russ is another guy that he's someone that's very interesting to me. But you start with Sam Mills III, defensive line coach. He's excited, obviously, because he's got one of the most talented groups on the football team. So he's got a lot to work with. He talked about Chase Young and how he doesn't seem like he's a rookie. He seems like he's a veteran. He's a guy that comes in, puts in the work, is well prepared, that kind of thing. He talked about snaps. That's a conversation a lot of people want to have about snaps, how you're going to, divvy that up. And he's like, look, if we're winning games, if we're ahead, there's going to be plenty of snaps to go around for all of these guys. But we want to put the best players on the field. But he's like, look, especially early in the season when guys are trying to get their legs under them, we're going to have these guys in heavy rotation. And, it's a great problem to have when you've got a bunch of talented players, because what that means is essentially you can keep fresh bodies on the field at all times. And that's what we're looking to do, is rotate these guys in and out, keep fresh bodies out there so that we can get guys performing at maximum efficiency. So it was good to hear from him. Look forward to seeing what he's able to do with this talented group of defenders. Chris Harris, the DB's coach, was an interesting listen. I remember him from his playing days, and I really liked the message that he was providing, which was, hey, look, I was a late round draft pick as a 6th round pick out of Louisiana Lafayette. I had to scratch and claw for everything that I got in this league, and so I have a soft spot for the Jimmy Morelands and the Greg Stromans of the world. Stroman was a 6th round pick. Moreland was a 7th round pick. These are guys that I think are very talented. It's a young group of corners, but there are also some veterans mixed in. And he talked about liking Fab Moreau's length and speed and size as a corner that played outside. But he also said that, they're DBs. They're not just corners and safeties. He's like, we're DBs. I tell my players this all the time. You're not just a corner. You got to know every position on the field, especially in the secondary, and you got to know what the responsibility is. You might be playing a little bit of safety. You might be playing a little bit of nickel. You might be playing out wide, and that goes for everybody. They got to know. We might be asking Landon Collins to drop over the slot, even though I don't think they're going to try to put him in that position. He's like, he still needs to know what his responsibility is if we do ask him to do that. He talked about Landon Collins and said, man, he's a beast in the box. Remember how everybody wanted to get away from calling him just a box safety? Let's call a spade. Let's call a spade a spade. He's really good in the box. He does Pro Bowl-like work in the box. He's just a guy away from the line of scrimmage. You put Landon Collins in the box, and he's a difference maker. Let's call a spade a spade. He is a dominant box safety. All right, cool. We paid $86 million or whatever it was, $84 million for a box safety. Whatever. I don't care. Maximize the guy's ability. That's what I'm looking forward to. And Chris Harris sounds like he wants to do that. He talked about, Kendall Fuller and bringing him in. And again, utilizing all of these guys. Remember, Kendall played safety, nickel, and corner in this league. Here, the first time around, he was primarily a nickel. In Kansas City, he played out wide his first season. And in his second year, he played a lot of safety. So he's like, look, a lot of guys have versatility, flexibility. I just want these guys to understand they're not tied or bound to any one position. We're DBs. You got to be able to tackle. You got to be able to play safety. You got to be able to play nickel. You got to be able to play out wide. I love it. So that was his message. He talked about having some veterans like Aaron Colvin. He talked about having, a veteran like Darby come in. And he's like, these are all guys that, if you use them correctly, they're going to. And Ron Rivera talked about Darby saying, hey, look, Darby, I don't think it's a diminished skills standpoint. He's just got to be more disciplined with his eyes. His eyes got him into trouble. And he's right. That's essentially how Terry McLaurin got behind him last year. Eyes get him in trouble, not paying attention. A wise man once told me, hey, man, mind your luggage. All right? Don't lose your luggage. You don't have a lot to do. The guy in front of you is your luggage. Keep your luggage. Okay? Don't lose your luggage, man. You get nosy. You start eyeballing the backfield, looking at the quarterback, and minding other people's luggage. Yours ends up getting lost. All right? So then you get to Randy Jordan. He was fun. He was a fun one. Talking about the running back. And remember, he's got more experience because he was here last year. He's got experience with these guys. So he can talk very candidly about Darius Geis and AD and, J.D. McKissick, even though he wasn't here last year. He can talk about a Bryce Love. These are all players he's familiar with. And so he was interesting because he talked about AD being, from a different planet, which he is because he's 35 and he's still playing like he's 28. But I talked about, what he said earlier, how what you want to do with these running backs because you have a dearth of talent and versatility with these guys. You want to put guys in the best positions to succeed, meaning you don't want to put Adrian Peterson in the game to run, as I mentioned, arrow route. Or you don't want to put him in to run a route into the flats to catch the football. That's not when you've got J.D. McKissick and Antonio Gibson and Bryce Love and other guys that can catch. You don't want to put Adrian Peterson in there. But in the same token, it's 3rd and 1. I don't want to put Bryce Love in the game for 3rd and 1. I don't want J.D. McKissick in on 3rd and 1. I want AD in, or I want Darius Geis in on 3rd and 1. So he essentially said, look, everybody's got to know what their responsibility is, no matter how you're going to be used. But we're going to make sure we put guys on the field in the best positions to succeed. And, obviously that's what you got to do. And so I thought Randy Jordan was awesome and kind of breaking that down and talking about the running back position. And he's excited about the running backs. He said he's excited because he thinks the running backs are going to have a much bigger role in this offense catching the football than in past years in Jay Gruden's system. And that's what he's most excited about. He's like, it's more of a challenge. Things can get stale when you're doing the same stuff over and over again. This year, the running back in this system under Scott Turner, the running backs are going to be more responsible for catching the football out of the backfield. And so he's excited about challenging these running backs to really be a big part of the pass offense. You look at linebackers coach Steve Russ. Really interesting guy. He talked about coaching Luke Kuechly and saying, look, Luke Kuechly was a one-of-a-kind type of linebacker, Hall of Fame guy. Obviously, we don't have that guy here, but, being in that environment with him and Thomas Davis once upon a time and Shaq Thompson and all the talented guys that they have, they know what talented linebacker play and talented linebackers look like. So he's coming in here with an idea of, hey, how can we get guys to play at a high level and get guys to perform in this defense the way that we did in Carolina when we had top-notch linebacker play. So he kind of talked about a lot of the guys. The most interesting thing that Steve Russ said didn't pertain to any of the guys in the linebacker room. He did talk about Reuben Foster, and he said Reuben Foster's doing everything we could ask of him at this point. He's been great in terms of leadership. He's taking every mental rep. You see him mouthing every play, even when I'm talking to a different player. So he said had nothing but great things to say about Reuben Foster. But he talked about Ryan Anderson. He said, I'm going to be honest with you. Ryan Anderson really hasn't been in my room. Ryan Anderson has been in Steve's room. Steve being Sam's room, being Sam Mills, the third room, meaning he's been with the defensive line, so the defensive ends. Interesting development there that I didn't really necessarily think. And you know what? It's early, and they could have him in the D-line room. He could be also kind of going back and forth down the road. He might be in the backers room. We just all assume that he'd be kicking ass as a strong side linebacker, that he'd be jacking up some tight ends in the run game, blowing up some stuff in the backfield, and just being dominant over the tight end. I don't know about that. They may have other plans. Remember, Ron Rivera was non-committal on what the hell to do with Ryan Anderson. He's like, we got to figure out a way to utilize Ryan Anderson. We really don't know. He kind of admitted that on a Zoom call a while back. So sounds like he's in the defensive line room. And Steve Russ kind of admitted that, passive aggressively, like, hey, look, I can't really tell you much about him. He hasn't even really been in my room. So that's something to keep an eye on. Then you get to wide receiver coach Jim Hostler. And I can tell you this, interesting guy, very quiet, but he's so direct. And I can tell you right now, he's going to coach those receivers hard. So my biggest take, and he had a lot of information. And he's another one of these guys. His first name is Frank. His last name is Blunt. All right. Because he's Frank and Blunt. All right. This guy is no nonsense. And he's like, look, I don't know these guys. The only guy that's done anything is Terry McLaurin. I couldn't tell you any of these guys. Adam from Eve. We don't have a lot of experience in this room. We're young. He said, Terry's good, but he's not great. He's like, look, he's right about Terry. It's only been 1 year. All right. And he said, it's easy for a guy to come in and nobody's really looking for you. Terry wasn't a first-round pick. Terry wasn't a second-round pick. He was a third-round pick in the 2019 draft. And so nobody was expecting Terry. We didn't see Terry at all in the preseason, so we didn't really know what to expect. And he just burst onto the scene and ate the Eagles alive and should have even had even more yards. Should have had damn near 200 yards on the Eagles in week 1 if Case Keenum would have hit him on that second deep ball. That's nor here nor there. Anyway, he's like, it's easy to sneak up on people when they don't know you're coming. And he's right. That's why the Redskins have always been good when everyone's think we're going to stink, because there's no expectations. There's no one, looking at you as the hunted. You're usually the hunter in those situations. And Terry was the hunter last year. Now he's going to be the hunted. He ate up some very good NFL corners last year. Stephon Gilmore and Darius Slay. He went toe-to-toe with the league's best last year and roasted them at times. So there's going to be a bullseye on his chest now, on his back, because other teams are now looking at Terry McLaurin and saying, hey, you're the number one, and we're going to treat you as such. Last year, teams didn't respect him as much. If we were to play the Patriots again, they'd just take Stephon Gilmore and stick him on him and let him travel with him. That's the kind of respect Terry McLaurin now has. He didn't necessarily garner that last season. And so Jim Hostler said, look, he's got to prove that he can be a number one now, because everyone's going to give him number one treatment. And so he's right, because once upon a time, there was a guy named Michael Clayton. A lot of you don't remember Michael Clayton, and for good reason. He had one tremendous season, and you know where that season came? His rookie season in Tampa. I think it was like 2006, 2007, somewhere in there. Burst onto the scene out of LSU. 80 catches, 1,100 plus yards, damn near 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns. I remember he had a touchdown where his helmet came off and he did the Dougies in the end zone. I was like, damn, Michael Clayton out there beasting. Damn, Tampa hit it big with this dude. I just told you he had 7 touchdowns in his rookie season. He had 10. He had 10 for his career. So 3 touchdowns the next 6 years of his career. He had 1,193 yards that rookie season. He ended up with 2,300 yards for his career. All right. He had like 224 catches in his career. 80 of them came in his rookie season. So a third of those catches came in year 1. And I don't think that's going to be Terry McLaurin. So don't get what I'm saying twisted. Don't misconstrue what I'm saying. I'm just telling you, you've got to go out and prove it. Teams started treating Michael Clayton like a number one. Injuries hit, and then he couldn't rise to the level of play that those number one corners were putting on his ass. I think Terry's going to show up. He's going to show out. But Jim Hostler was like, look, he's going to have to prove he's a number one. Teams are going to treat him like a number one. He's not sneaking up on anybody anymore. He's got to go out and prove it. We're going to see if he can do that. He also talked about the rest of these receivers like, look, man, I don't know what we got. All right, none of these guys have proven anything. He didn't even give Steven Sims any love. He was like, look, I don't know any of these guys. Even Sims did a little something, but look, all of these guys got to prove it. It's a clean slate. Cam Sims is no different than Steven Sims in my estimation. He's looking at it and he's like, look, everybody's got a chance. They got to prove it to me. So that's going to be really interesting to see what he does with that group. Because he even cussed. A lot of these guys were reserved. He even cussed on his presser. He was like, yeah, Terry, last year, teams weren't coming at him. Normally, teams jam the shit out of you. I'm like, whoa. You don't hear guys getting aggressive with their language. But Jim Hostler is really interesting. It'll be interesting to see how these receivers respond to him and the way he coaches. I'm looking forward to seeing that. And then Ken Zampese might have been the most informative and maybe my favorite interview. I knew Ken Zampese. His dad, Ernie Zampese, been in the league. When you hear the Zampese name, it's like a family lineage thing, like Turner or Shanahan. It's just one of those football families that's been around for a long time. And he told the story about Joe Gibbs trying to recruit his dad to Washington. Remember, Gibbs came from San Diego. Air Coryell, you see where the comparisons and all of the carryover comes from. And we talk about Air Coryell all the time, the overlap. That's why Ken Zampese is here, because that's, what he's familiar with. His dad was familiar with that offense. That's why Joe wanted him here, because Joe was an Air Coryell disciple. So y'all see how all of this stuff is interconnected and how it kind of intertwines with one another. But he told that story. I loved him talking about Dwayne. He's, talking about Dwayne working out with Cam Newton. He said, look, I called up Dwayne when I saw the picture of him with Cam Newton out there with Deshaun Watson and Cam. I hit him up immediately. It was like, yo, you need to pick his brain and get as many shortcuts and different things about this playbook as you can. And he said, Coach, I'm already on it. So he's like, I love that he was already on it. And he talked about Dwayne, and he said, I love Dwayne's release. It's quick. It's fluid. There are no holes in his motion. He's like, the guy's got a cannon. He's smart. Everything that you're looking for in a quarterback. And he says, the thing I love about him most is that, and really the thing I love, tutoring and mentoring young quarterbacks, because Ken Zampese's been through the gamut of quarterbacks. He's been around Brett Favre. He's been around Donovan McNabb. He's been around Kurt Warner. All of these were winning franchises. And when these quarterbacks were young in their infant stages of their careers, he was around these quarterbacks. So he knows a thing or two. Andy Dalton, Carson Palmer in Cincinnati. And Baker Mayfield, most recently in 2018, when Baker Mayfield hit the ground running as a rookie and lit it up, the guy that really got a lot of the credit, and rightfully so for that, was Ken Zampese. He was the guy that was really mentoring Baker Mayfield and got him to play that well. And it's not a coincidence that in 2019, when Ken Zampese moves on, Baker Mayfield struggled in 2019. So, a lot of that had to do with his offensive coordinator going to head coach and really being in over his head. But that's nor here nor there. Bottom line is that Ken Zampese, very knowledgeable guy, been around the block. He said, I love mentoring young quarterbacks because they don't know any better. They're not stuck in their ways. They haven't learned things, and they're not jaded by what you're saying. They're like sponges. They want to soak everything up. They're like a slab of clay. You can mold them any way you want. They don't have any preconceived notions about how things are supposed to be done. They're just looking to soak up all the information. So Ken Zampese, he even got into some football nerdy stuff, which I love. You know, he gave us a call. He was talking about, you know, how he's trying to lump these reads together for Dwayne. So, you know, 6 or, you know, 9 plays might have the same 2 reads, same similar concepts. But look, these are the reads you need to be looking at and trying to group it together to make it easy for Dwayne. I just thought he was really informative. Loved Ken Zampese. I just think this is a really strong group of coaches, you know, stronger than what we've had in the past. I'm excited to see what they're able to do. But the theme essentially was, look, we haven't really gotten a chance to see what these guys can do because we're not really doing anything in camp yet. But it was interesting to hear these guys speak and talk about their philosophies and what they think about some of these players. And so ultimately, I think this is going to be a very, very interesting group of coaches that the Washington football team has moving forward under Ron Rivera.
Louie.